Hello, it's Tuesday, August 12th. Welcome to episode 2 of the Mituye News. I'm your host, Professor X. We'll get into it like we usually do. We'll cover some of the biggest stories from the newsletter, from the global sphere, from the national sphere, from the state and city level. And we'll start off here with what is an ongoing story, a big story, right? It's been captivating of a lot of airspace for quite some time because it's such a big deal, it's indicative of so much shared understanding maybe, of what is acceptable in terms of international relations. So it really has stood out across the many things always happening throughout the world. And that's the Ukraine war, Ukraine and Russia. Today, we have a statement from the EU, and the EU is really staunchly asserting that Ukraine shouldn't be bullied into changing their borders. Russia can't just willy-nilly, arbitrarily declare they want something and then take it. They are very concerned that Putin's dictatorial regime is going to engage in just non-stop conquest. They're just going to keep taking and taking and taking. So they don't want that precedent set. So they're quite staunch in their support of Ukraine here. So they're saying we can't afford to have this precedent. We can't even, it's a non-starter. They can't be coerced into changing their borders here. With that said, we have seen many countries join NATO, which is kind of the military arm of the EU, in an effort to respond to what they see is Putin's increasing aggression in the region. Today, so we have this. We have Ukraine, we got Russia, we have the EU, we have the United States, we have a lot of discussion about how to end the war. And partly people are suggesting that the war can end through concession. I'm in that camp. So I'm in the camp. I'm quite critical of the Ukrainian government. I am of the opinion that, I want the bloodshed to stop, the war to end. I feel like Ukraine is going to have to come to terms with that. The aggression was triggered in part by their courting of Western powers, which was a hard red line for Russia. The war is unwinnable, in my opinion, without sustained support from something like NATO, from something like the United States. I think many of the Russian demands are, in my opinion, reasonable. I say cede the land, stop the bloodshed. A generation of young men has already died in the war. Enough is enough. We should stop there. But I'm just a guy in a room with opinions. What's important is Putin and Trump are meeting in Alaska, and Trump is also of the mind that some concessions can be made. He's a little more staunch in his pushback against Putin. You can't have it all, but what about this? What about this part right here? They're meeting in Alaska without Zelensky, is my understanding. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has really been staunchly opposed, much like the EU, to any concessions. He's really of the mind that this is illicit aggression. Russia shouldn't be rewarded for their behavior. It seems to be what I take Zelensky's position to be. But they'll meet today, soon, yesterday, I'm not sure. But they're meeting. And so that will produce at least some type of signaling as to where those countries stand in relation to the dispute. So anyway, EU is really staunchly advocating that should not happen. As we see, European leaders have warned against Ukraine's borders being redrawn by force 3 days before Russia's Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump are due to hold a summit on Ukraine in Alaska. So in a statement, European leaders said the people of Ukraine must have freedom to decide their future. And it's a tricky situation. And I totally am sympathetic to the cause of self-determination, self-governance. It feels just for Ukraine, which is a sovereign country, to defend its borders. I'm quite critical of what that government has done. And so I want the war to end, maybe. In short, is what I should say. But that's what happened today. The EU has determined that they don't want that to occur. They don't want the Ukrainians to have to change their borders due to Russian aggression. This here is a map, kind of demonstrating the conflict zone and what Russia has claimed, what they've taken, and much of this is what they want to keep. So that is what the arguments are about. Cool. We'll go on to our next story here, which is that the U.S. and China, they're going to extend their trade truce for 90 days. So we have an economic game of chicken with where the world stands in the middle, hoping both countries don't collide. So that's a very serious situation. They're pushing back the deadline, the date of the doomsday, the day of no return, for another 3 months, another 90 days. But that's not a resolution. That's like a kick in the can down the road. I'm hoping they can come to terms that make sense, allow for the global economy to stay intact, allow for things to not turn kinetic or, more problematic than they need be. I'm of the opinion that kind of two things need to happen. One is that the U.S. has to align with an ideological position that we live in a multipolar world. So BRICS, this organization, an economic organization, this economic alliance around a lot of countries that have historically been dominated by Western powers. They're really asserting some authority, some make room, right? They're trying to suggest we're not your little brothers anymore, right? Like the United States and the Western powers can't just determine everything because they wrote something down, right? It seems to be an important element of their organization. I think the U.S. is going to have to adopt that shared understanding that the modern world, the contemporary world, is going to have to be a multipolar world. So that's one thing that needs to happen. The second thing is China's just going to have to behave a little better. A lot of the accusations appear to be legitimate, stealing intellectual property, but kind of misleading other governments to a degree that's unacceptable. In terms of what the reality is in China, economically, politically, socially, cooking books, essentially, that's got to stop. Because it's going to be hard, I think, to foster cooperation if you're not acting in quasi good faith. I get it. All countries, play a little game to make it appear a little differently than it is, much like I would imagine, different football teams, NFL teams, are kind of coy in their injury reserve roster list. There's a little bit of misdirection going on there, but it can't be to the degree that you're flatly lying. It's just simply not true. That won't work either. So I hope those things can occur. I hope the tension here can be resolved and can kind of facilitate some of those overarching shifts. And I hope we, as you'll come to know if you continue to watch the show or read the newsletter, check it out on Substack. I'm not a detractor of tariffs. I'm pro-tariff. I like that type of jockeying. I like that type of competitive atmosphere. I think it's healthy for international relations. But it can't be to the degree that you're attempting to destroy your opponent. It has to be to the degree that you're attempting to one up or outdo your opponent in this kind of way of finding a reasonable equilibrium, like a good balance. The trade balance is what it is designed to do. But anyway, as we have it, President Donald Trump extended a trade truce with China for another 90 days Monday, at least delaying once again a dangerous showdown between the world's two biggest economies. Trump posted on his Truth Social platform that he signed the executive order for the extension and that all other elements of the agreement will remain the same. Beijing, at the same time, also announced the extension of the tariff pause, according to the Ministry of Commerce. So here we have agreement. Push it down 90 days. Hopefully we can figure something out. Hopefully the government of the United States and the CCP can figure something out in the next 90 days that feels fair to both parties. And that is the result I think we should cheer for. Let's move right along. What else we got today? Baltimore. As we know, Trump has been aggressive. He's taking cities, federal control, federalizing police, National Guard, violent gangs, and all. So he's been aggressive. He federalized the enforcement in DC, took control of the local police force, put some national troops there, said it's way too dangerous. There's too much going on in the city. We deserve better. Is Trump's claim. Others were quite upset in a fervor. He's a dictator. This is authoritarianism, and we're all going to soon live in military camps. Right? Seemed to be the tension. Recently, like yesterday, today, maybe this morning, he went on to be like, and I'm going to federalize some other cities. I'm going to federalize Chicago. I'm going to federalize Oakland. I'm coming for Baltimore, or at least I might. Right? These felt like threats. And the mayor of Baltimore responded. So the mayor of Baltimore essentially was like, this is racist. Importantly, all of these cities have black mayors, and all of these are black cities. Like, when you think of DC, you think of Chocolate City. When you think of Oakland, the Yay area, shout out to, to Oakland in the Bay, Chicago, so there is, and they all have black mayors. So this, I understand where that sentiment is coming from. Like, what about these other cities that are there's a lot of American cities out of control. Maybe we start there. What about these cities in particular is making Trump be like, yeah, they need me. They need new leadership. They need someone else in charge. Is it because these are black mayors? It seems to be, at least the mayor of Baltimore is concerned, and a lot of people's concerned. A lot of people have said that. I'm kind of stuck in the middle, because if you know me, especially over time, I have a really staunch pro-black position, very much an advocate, defensive of black people in the United States, black people globally, right? At the same time, Oakland is out of control. Like, it's a real problem in Oakland, and they're running out of money. They don't have the resources to fix it. The similar situation is similar in Chicago. The situation is similar in Baltimore. Okay. So what I make of this is, like, I think this is maybe a good call to arms. I'm kind of happy with the pushback. Like, we could, local autonomy is important. We can manage it ourselves. We don't need the federal government. Understood. Then manage it yourselves. So I hope that this is like a rallying cry and a opportunity to truly reveal the shortcomings of these cities, the things that they're struggling with, and put together like comprehensive plans as to how to deal with them. I hope this triggers that. Sometimes having a common enemy can get the kids to act right? Like, they can put together a plan to keep the house clean because they're tired of dad threatening to take away the TV. Okay, so maybe this provides an opportunity for this higher authority to be the bad guy, and these lower bodies to kind of coalesce, build momentum around rejecting the over disciplinary action, this overreach from the federal government. I hope that triggers this. But yeah, the Baltimore mayor on cities called out by Trump. The president could learn a lot from us. Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott accused President Trump of promoting racist viewpoints after the president suggested Monday that Baltimore was among the major U.S. cities his Washington, D.C. crime crackdown could expand to. Scott, in an interview late Monday, suggested the White House should instead work with mayors who are already trying to drive down violent crime rates. The president could learn a lot from us instead of throwing things at us, the Charm City mayor said on CNN's Laura Coates Live. What he's doing is dog whistling through this right-wing propaganda and, quite frankly, racist viewpoints that they have about what these cities about these cities, and trying to convince the American people that what they know is not true. Okay, that's where me and him are kind of, what they know is not true. Well, I have to travel a lot for work. So I'm in Philadelphia, I'm in St. Louis, I'm in Chicago. My eyes and my experience of the culture is telling me something. I feel like I know something. And I also feel like much of the criticism around the shifts in reporting of crime in many of these cities does create misleading indications of the direction of like what crime feels like in the city. Like, what does it mean in terms of like the average person's relation to criminal activity? At the same time hearing with the dog whistle. I do hear the concern, the way, especially who listens when Trump talks. So who is he talking to, and what do they hear when they hear Trump suggest these cities are out of control? We got to go to Chicago, and there's violent crimes, and there's thugs, the bloodthirsty thugs hanging from the ceiling. They hear, super predators, the black kids are outside causing terror. That's what they hear. I experience there's a lot of problems out here. And it's not just black folks. It's like these cities are breeding like some serious criminal underbellies. And that has to be dealt with. So anyway, I'll leave it there. It's a lot going on, but the Baltimore mayor has, responded like, hey, hello, Mr. Trump. I have something to say. He's young. I think he's poised to be someone that will be in the political sphere for quite some time. So I also think it's noteworthy to see how he is building his professional resume, I'll say, or building his persona, his kind of overarching appearance in our collective consciousness. Like this is a guy who we should be aware of. What's his name again? Brandon Scott. I think he'll be around for quite some time. Okay, our final story. Oh, sorry, we got a lot of ads here. Our final story is in Oklahoma. As we see here, federal court upholds Oklahoma ban on gender-affirming care for minors. It's funny, even as an academic who should have license to speak freely, I'm like always quite cautious. I always don't want to say the wrong thing when it comes to particularly gender-affirming care. I don't want to be crass or incorrect or something. But what I will say is that this really does put me in a kind of pickle here. I'm torn between the idea of government overreach, right? People have to be able to decide what to do medically, what to do with their children, right? There has to be some protection from the government's intrusion into decision making and the protection of children, because they are not in a position to decide for themselves some decisions. So their parents have to do it, and their parents can't decide things like, we'll cut off your legs. Be wrong. That would be wrong, and I would say the government should intervene. How gender affirming care sits in that dichotomy is very, very tricky, because at least I've been convinced by evidence that it is something that ought to be delayed generally in terms of what they're talking about, because the evidence seems to be iffy. And so I don't know, I lean towards the protection of the child. But anyway, my shallow understanding of the problem aside, that's what's going on. Oklahoma has banned it, and many states have. Oklahoma's flatly banned it. There was a question about whether this can continue, and a federal appeals court, I think on a 2-1 ruling, decided, yeah, they can continue on. And this ban is now a couple of years old. So let's take a look here. A federal appeals court has upheld Oklahoma's ban on gender affirming procedures for minors. The 10th Circuit of Appeals, which represents the region of Oklahoma, Colorado, Kansas, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, found Wednesday that the Oklahoma legislators' 2023 ban was not intended to discriminate against transgender children. Oh, it's unanimous. The unanimous ruling relied on a recent Supreme Court decision, United States versus Skirmetti, which upheld a similar Tennessee ban on gender-affirming care for transgender youth. Let's see. The Oklahoma legislature passed a ban with Senate Bill 613 in May 2023. The law bans gender-affirming medical treatments for Oklahomans under 18 years old and creates a felony for healthcare providers who violate the ban. So yeah, that's what I understand the constituents of Oklahoma, their representatives to have done, is to have suggested this is too dangerous for youth to be engaging in, so we're going to protect them by banning it, and if you do it, you'll be penalized. That's all I got for you today. Like, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Really do check out the Substack. That's the heart of this endeavor here. The link is in the description. Have a good day, stay informed, and as always, strive to be hard to conquer. I'll see you all tomorrow.